The city felt off, wrong. A dense, humid air hung over the streets, thick with the stench of exhaust fumes and decay. Even in daylight, shadows seemed deeper, stretching out from alleyways like grasping claws. I felt a prickle on the back of my neck, a constant unease. It began subtly, a fleeting glimpse of movement in my peripheral vision, a hushed whisper carried on the wind that ceased when I turned my head. The homeless man, his face obscured by a thick gray beard, stared at me with vacant eyes. "Homeless man," they whisper, he rasped, his voice a dry, rattling sound. "Who whispers?" I asked, more out of politeness than genuine curiosity. "Homeless man." "Down there," he gestured vaguely towards a nearby subway entrance, "in the tunnels." His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. I tried to ignore the shiver that ran down my spine. These were just the ramblings of a madman, I told myself. The missing persons posters started appearing more frequently. Each face stared out, eyes wide with a fear I felt echoed in my own heart. One stifling summer night, the oppressive heat chased me from my bed. Restless, I wandered onto my fire escape for some air. A glint of metal caught my eye. It was a drain grating on the street below, slightly ajar. From the black void beneath, I heard a soft, wet sound, like something large, struggling to breathe. Driven by a morbid curiosity, I found myself unable to resist the pull of the unknown. The eerie allure of the place had taken root in my mind, and I knew I had to return. I returned the next day, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. The air was thick with an unsettling silence, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The grating was still slightly open just as I had left it. It seemed to beckon me, inviting me to uncover its secrets. I knelt down, peering into the darkness. The void seemed to stretch endlessly, swallowing the light and my courage. Something moved down there, a shadow within shadows, a flicker of movement too quick to make out clearly. My breath caught in my throat as I strained to see. Then, I saw them. Pale faces, ghostly white in the gloom, with eyes that glinted like polished obsidian. They seemed to float in the darkness, disembodied and haunting. They were pressed against the metal bars, staring up at me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. Their eyes were filled with a silent plea, a desperate hunger that I could feel in my bones, a silent chorus of hunger and malice. Their gaze was unrelenting, piercing through the darkness and into my very soul. I could feel their need, their longing, and it terrified me. I stumbled back, heart pounding. It couldn't be real. My mind raced, trying to rationalize what I had seen. It had to be a trick, an illusion born of fear and shadows. It was just a trick of the light, a figment of my overactive imagination. But deep down I knew that what I had seen was real. The pale faces, the haunting eyes, they were real, and they were waiting. As I left the place, a lingering sense of dread followed me. I could feel their eyes on my back, watching, waiting. The memory of their faces haunted my dreams, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked just out of sight. I tried to return to my normal life, to forget the faces and the darkness, but the memory clung to me, a shadow that I couldn't shake. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of light brought me back to that moment. I was haunted by the memories, unable to escape the feeling that they were still out there waiting for me. The pale faces, the ghostly eyes, they had become a part of me, a dark secret that I carried with me always. And so, driven by a need to understand, I resolved to return, to face the darkness once more, to uncover the truth behind the pale faces. For better or worse, I knew that my journey was far from over. Section 5. The Lurking Fear. But the fear remained, a constant companion. The city, once familiar and comforting, now pulsed with a hidden menace. I avoided the subway, opting for the crowded, brightly lit streets. But even there I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The homeless man's words echoed in my mind. They whisper. They were always there, lurking just beyond the veil of the ordinary, waiting. Section 6. Snatched in the Night. One night I awoke to a scream. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, her voice raw with terror. I rushed to my window, peering out into the night. Two figures were dragging her towards the open maw of a manhole. They were quick, inhumanly strong. Mrs. Peterson's pleas were cut short as they vanished into the darkness. I stood there paralyzed with fear, as the echoes of her screams faded into the night. The city felt colder now, the air thick with a palpable sense of dread. Section 7. The Descent. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Driven by a mixture of terror and a strange sense of duty, I decided to descend into the abyss. I knew what lurked below. I had seen their faces, heard their whispers. Armed with only a flashlight and a growing sense of dread, I pried open the drain grating I had seen before. The stench that wafted up was overpowering, a mix of mildew, decay, and something else. Something metallic and alien. Taking a deep breath, I climbed down the rusty ladder, disappearing into the darkness. Section 8. City of Shadows. The air down below was thick and heavy, difficult to breathe. My flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing a labyrinth of tunnels, stretching out like arteries beneath the city. The walls were slick with moisture, covered in a web of pipes and cables that hummed with a strange energy. I felt a presence here, something ancient and malevolent, watching me. Section 9. The Feeding. I followed the tunnels, each turn leading me deeper into the heart of the unseen city. The walls were damp, and the air was thick with an unsettling silence, broken only by the occasional drip of water echoing through the passageways. My footsteps seemed to reverberate louder than they should, as if the tunnels themselves were amplifying the sound, warning the inhabitants of my approach. The air grew colder, the stench of decay intensifying with every step I took. It was a smell that clung to my clothes and filled my lungs, making it hard to breathe. Then, I heard it. A sound that sent shivers down my spine. A low, guttural chanting echoing off the tunnel walls. It was a sound unlike anything I had ever heard before, a mix of human and something else entirely. The chanting grew louder, more insistent, as if calling me towards it, pulling me deeper into the darkness. It drew me towards a cavernous chamber, lit by flickering torches that cast long dancing shadows on the walls. The light was dim, but it was enough to reveal the horror that lay within. The chamber was vast, its ceiling lost in the darkness above. In the center, a horrifying tableau unfolded. The scene was like something out of a nightmare, a twisted vision of hell brought to life. The air was thick with the smell of blood and decay, and the sound of the chanting was almost deafening now. Dozens of those pale creatures, their eyes glowing with a predatory hunger, were gathered around a pit. They moved with a terrifying grace, their movements almost hypnotic in their fluidity. Their eyes never left the pit, as if they were waiting for something or someone. I looked down and saw Mrs. Peterson along with countless others, their bodies broken and drained of life. They were food. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. These creatures were feeding, and the people in the pit were their prey. The sight was almost too much to bear, but I couldn't look away. I had to know what was happening and why. The chanting continued, growing louder and more frenzied, as if reaching a climax. The creatures began to move, their eyes glowing brighter, their hunger palpable. I knew I had to get out of there, but my feet felt like they were rooted to the spot. The horror of what I was witnessing was paralyzing, but I couldn't let it consume me. I had to find a way to escape, to warn the others. But how? The tunnels were a maze, and the creatures were everywhere. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. I had to be strong, for Mrs. Peterson, for all the others who had fallen victim to these monsters. I had to survive. Section 10. Escape from the Depths. Panic surged through me, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead as I realized the gravity of my situation. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, making it hard to breathe. I turned to run, my heart pounding against my ribs like a drum in a frantic rhythm. Each step echoed in the narrow passage, a constant reminder of the danger that lurked behind me. The creatures shrieked, their voices like nails on a chalkboard, piercing through the darkness. Their glowing eyes were like sinister beacons, guiding them closer to me with every passing second. They gave chase with an unrelenting ferocity, their movements swift and predatory. I scrambled through the tunnels, my flashlight bouncing wildly, casting grotesque shadows that danced around me. The flickering light played tricks on my mind, making every shadow seem like a new threat. My breath came in ragged gasps, the fear almost paralyzing. Behind me I could hear the creatures gaining, their rasping breaths echoing in the confined space. The sound was a constant reminder that I was not alone, that danger was just a heartbeat away. I pushed myself harder, my legs burning with the effort. I finally reached the ladder, climbing with a desperate urgency. Each rung felt like a lifeline, pulling me closer to safety. My hands were slick with sweat, making it hard to maintain my grip. I could feel the creature's presence growing stronger, their cold, clammy hands reaching for me. I could feel their cold, clammy hands grasping at my heels as I scrambled out of the hole and slammed the grating shut. The sound of the metal clanging echoed through the tunnel, a final barrier between me and the horrors below. I collapsed on the ground, my body trembling with exhaustion and relief. The nightmare was over, but the memory of those glowing eyes and shrieking voices would haunt me forever. Section 11. The Lingering Dread. I haven't been the same since. The city, once a symbol of progress and excitement, now feels like a thin veil draped over a bottomless abyss. The nightmares plague me. Pale faces with obsidian eyes peer in through my windows. The whispers follow me everywhere. I know they are still down there, feeding, growing stronger, and I know they are waiting for me to return to their unseen city.